In 1970, moral courage is what 8 African-American student athletes, including myself, exemplified by sacrificing our dreams and boycotting for change. Moral courage is actionable, and that is why I want to acknowledge the moral courage exhibited by our great university. Thank you. When so many institutions and organizations are trying to bury history, rewrite history, modify history, Syracuse University embraces its history through its ceaseless efforts to seek not only diversity, but inclusivity for its student body, its student athletes, its staff, and administration. That was my script. I'm going to deviate just for a minute. As I was sitting there thinking about the awards and the person that we're going to present the Syracuse Courage Award to, I thought about the inaugural speech by the Reverend Jesse L. Peck, the first president of the trustee board at Syracuse University. Two of the things that he mentioned in his speech that were important to the students at Syracuse University were brains and heart. Brains enough to qualify for Syracuse, and brains enough to say yes when you did qualify. The other thing was heart. And as I thought about it, as I was sitting there, I thought about you athletes and the heart it takes to be under pressure, under stress, in those critical moments in a game as you're competing, and somehow dig deep enough within yourself to make that extra effort to accomplish something. And this year's recipient of the Syracuse 8 Courage Award exhibited that type of bravery. In the face of rare and terrifying illness, he showed the heart of a champion and has returned to compete. This is his story.
So it all started back in November. I've been having kind of symptoms for a few weeks to do with my stomach, having a few issues, but nothing too serious. And then one day, I was just getting ready for practice on a Friday, and I was feeling a little sick, so I was just lying down in bed before practice, trying to kind of collect myself. And I got up out of bed, and I mean, that's the last thing I really remember for a little bit, because, well, according to my roommate, who was fortunately just next door, he just hears a really loud bang. He comes running into the room, and I'm just sprawled out on the floor. And I then remember coming to, and I'm just in really, really intense pain.
So I think our initial reaction was he's going to be okay. You know, something happened, and then, you know, they did a test. They found a slight bleed, I think, in the first time, and things were turning around. A couple days later, they release him, and then you get the call, an ambulance again. You know, and every time you get a call, it's something new, right? It's another level of complexity to what's going on. So I don't think it was immediate, like, concern, but as this went on and things kept piling up, it's like, which way is this gonna go? This is getting to be some pretty serious stuff.
I felt so lost. Kind of, you have this idea of medicine being this perfect science where they're going to know exactly what's wrong with you, because if you have something basic like a cold, you go in and they do know what's wrong with you. But as we learned throughout this kind of whole ordeal, I didn't have something normal and basic. So no one could work out what was wrong with me, and that meant that no one could tell me what was wrong. So I would just see myself getting a little more ill, a little better every day, and doctors would be trying something new every day, but there was no clear path to recovery, and that was really difficult. It was after my second admission, I was in a regular ward, and I've been getting more ill throughout the day, and then all I remember is I just started feeling really hot. So I'm crashing about, I'm like kicking about, and then suddenly I just stop moving, and kind of all of my numbers suddenly just flatline. It's like all of this beeping starts, and I just passed out, and I'm just completely out of it. And she runs out the room and gets a nurse. And it felt like I'd been asleep for maybe 20 seconds. So I'm like, oh, like, what? Like, but then I open my eyes, and there's 20 people in the room surrounding me, and I'm really, really confused. And it turned out that they'd called a code on me, which is a very serious medical thing when you're at risk of dying. At that point, I realized that there was something seriously wrong with me, and that's when they moved me to the ICU in Syracuse.
It was just constantly having his hopes dashed. His resiliency to make it through this serious of an illness in a country that is not his own, away from his family, not knowing what tomorrow is going to bring, and being a phenomenally good human being was basically the reason why we do the job that we do.
You know, you spend a lot of time with these young men, and you know, they're like sons to you in some regards. So you do what a parent would do, and you show up and you make sure everything's okay. You make sure that he and his mom have what they need. You know, Ben kind of took care of himself a lot through this in terms of his own attitude. There were some dark days, right? And you could see him sort of just mentally reset himself. You know, you keep who you are as a person intact in your personality. It was awesome, inspiring to watch Ben go through that.
I would put a smile on my face. I would always think, like, it's so hard to be angry when you're smiling. It's so hard to be angry when you're just trying to be nice. So I would always be as nice as I could to everyone around me, and I had this kind of undying belief that I was going to win. I was going to beat out this illness, and I was going to get better. I mean, my teammates were unbelievable during this period. I think I already knew that we had a strong bond, but it's often, I realized that it's during times of crisis is when you realize just how strong that bond is and just how much everyone cares about you. What really demonstrated just the level of support was actually, it's funny to say, but Syracuse rowing team managed to get themselves banned.
The security guards at the hospital were on the lookout for Syracuse rowing backpacks and clothing because there were so many people going down there to visit him.
They were ready to stay there as long as they had to, so that he knew that they were there to support him.
Every day they'd tell us, what will we do if this doesn't work? And that list grew shorter and shorter. And one of them was it was considered a bit of a nuclear option, but they believed it would work. And that was to give me a very heavy dose of blood thinners. The issue was they could only see it when I was bleeding, and they were never able to get a camera or a scan while I was bleeding. So they decided that they were going to make me bleed.
The Dieulafoy's lesion is very rare, like less than 1% of all GI bleeds are a result of Dieulafoy's lesions. You have to diagnose it through looking at the stomach lining with a camera down the throat. And before endoscopies were available, the mortality rate for Dieulafoy's lesions was between 80 and 90%, so it's quite serious.
Going into it, it didn't really occur to me how bad that might be. It was pretty bad. One day I started feeling really sick, just like a level of sickness I can't quite explain or even comprehend. It was just a complete overwhelming sickness, and they realized it was starting. It's this funny thing where I'm coming in out of consciousness, just really ill, but all of these doctors are actually quite happy and excited because they finally found it and they were going to get to go in and fix me. So they turned my ICU room into an operating room. Eventually they get in there and they find this unbelievably tiny lesion. It's about probably 1 millimeter long. And I saw a photo of it. It looks like nothing. And that was it. That was what's been causing me all of these problems. So they immediately cauterized it and then clipped it with a metal clip. And following that, I was fine.
What a great example for his teammates to stay positive through it all. And then once he was allowed to return to work, just to with a no-nonsense attitude, just get back to it.
I had this undying belief that I was going to win, I was going to beat out this illness, and I was going to get better. And I think I got that from rowing because I think it's impossible to ever beat a crew if you don't truly believe you're going to win. I mean, they could be the best team in the country and everyone thinks you're going to lose, but if you go into that race thinking you're going to lose, you will. So if you go into that race and you tell yourself, I'm going to win, you could win. And it was the same in the hospital. I knew I could get better.
It is my distinct honor to honor Benjamin Campbell-Reide.
I'd like to start by saying thank you, everyone. Kind of seeing this support means more than I can really put into words. It was a battle, but I got through it, and I wouldn't have been able to get through it without the people around me. Unfortunately, if I tried to thank everyone by name who helped me through this journey, we'd be here all night. So I want to take this time to recognize a few groups of people whose support was felt at every point during this chapter. I'd like to start, though, by thanking our SID, Liv, for nominating me for this award and for all the time and support she gave in helping her colleagues, Trey and Mike, put together such an incredible video. I would also like to thank my assistant coaches and the entire Syracuse athletics and medical staff for all the support during my hospital stay and throughout my recovery. I am so deeply grateful as well to the doctors and nurses at both Krause and Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston. Without their exceptional care, I would not have the privilege of standing before you today. Of course, I want to thank my teammates, whose support was constant and meant more than I can ever truly express. I really will never forget how many of you turned up and tried to turn up. I think it's a record that we should be proud of, that we managed to get banned from Krause. I think that's very, very impressive. I'd also like to thank the junior class parents. The kindness you showed through your gifts, your words, and your actions meant the world to both me and my mum. To my family back home, I know how hard it was for you to see me so ill and not be able to be by my side. Even from 3,000 miles away, I felt your love every single day. And there are a few more people I'd like to thank more personally. I'll begin with my roommates and my friends who were there for me during those medical emergencies which I had at home. The maturity and calmness you showed in those incredibly stressful moments made everything just a little more manageable. And I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been there. Dr. McCool, thank you for the care, support, and advice before, during, and after my hospital stay, and for nominating me for this award. Both me and my mum would have been lost without you. Your patience, generosity with your time, and constant encouragement made all the difference. And Coach Reichman, you always tell us to spread the sunshine, and you truly do lead by example. From your regular hospital visits to everything you managed behind the scenes, you made an incredibly difficult time much, much easier for me and my mum. I truly cannot thank you enough for everything you did. But before I wrap this up, I need to thank two people who did more for me than I ever could have asked for. The first is Jen Street, the mother of my teammate Anders, who was there in the hospital the very next morning after I was readmitted. She was there to help take care of me while my mum made her way over from England. As it became clear that the doctors at Krause were no longer able to make any progress on my condition, she arranged for me to be transferred to Brigham Hospital in Boston and welcomed my mum into her home once I'd been moved there. Jen, I cannot begin to thank you enough for your incredible generosity and kindness throughout this entire journey. The final person I'd like to thank is, of course, my mum. I was not the only one living out of a hospital for 4 weeks. She was there with me every day, from morning until night. Her positivity and love carried me through this incredibly difficult process. Even at the lowest points, she helped me believe that things would get better. I would not have made it through without you. Thank you. Before I leave you tonight, I want to share something that helped carry me through this experience. During this time, the hardest part was the unknown. Over and over, the doctors would think they had fixed the problem, and then it would turn out they had not. I kept getting sicker with no clear answer why. I distinctly remember being taken to the ICU and wondering if I would ever get better, if this was the end. In that moment, I made a decision. I was going to win against the illness. It was no longer a question of whether I would get better, but when. That belief carried me through the weeks that followed, and even at my lowest, when I couldn't walk or eat, I would still try to put a smile on my face and keep moving forward. What I learned is simple. Adversity can stop you, or it can reveal you. You get to choose. Believe in yourself, take control, and keep pushing, because you cannot win if you do not believe you can. Thank you.